Hey guys, it's Sean. And today's video, I wanted to cover something I think is like super underappreciated. I don't think gets enough attention. And really, if you apply what I have to share in this video today and you were to absorb, you know, any amount of information that I share, I do think that, if you run a coaching consulting business, it doesn't matter what level, I do believe that you'll end up building something I think a lot more peaceful, a lot more calmer, and something that's actually a genuine extension of you. Um, and really, to kind of hone in on the point, is I believe businesses need boundaries. I believe businesses need rules. And I think those rules are just derivations of what we value. And so in this video, I wanted to really cover, well, how do we think about that? What are the rules that I'm taking into my own consulting business that I'm going to be running? What are some examples of like, rules that, where like, how do we define, our values and how do we then create rules around those values? And also, how does that then affect how you run the business, how you build the business, how you sell, market, and deliver inside the business? Because I think that is probably the biggest consequence of actually having rules that we ourselves define. And so, just to kind of like get to the point and really jump into it, I think businesses are just rogue creations in general. I think, a lot of the people that come into the space, or, even myself, and if you're on the other side of this video and you are in the coaching consultant space, I think a lot of us just build these businesses and services to, our own external and internal needs. And I think one of those is, and I think this is a rule handed to us unbeknowingly by the industry, which is one, make money. And I think number two, make it as efficient as possible. And I think number three, do it every month, on and on and on, until you basically fall flat and you give up, or you get tired. And I think that there, I think, is probably just one of the big issues, is I think people adopt that in the beginning because I guess that's just, the big reason why we all come into the space sometimes. But I think no one then stops to realize that actually, if we start asking ourselves, well, what is it that we value and what rules can we create for our own businesses and what we actually value, how does that actually then start to affect, what we truly build? And so, when I think about just, values and my own and how I think about it, like I said, rules are just, they are just consequences or derivations of what it is that you value. And so if you want to understand what you value, I would probably encourage you to ask the question, and this is something I've asked myself, which is, what is it that I want to protect in terms of, what do I want to have time for? What is it that I always want to be able to do? What do I spend my money on, and what is it that I always want to be able to, spend my money on and reap the benefits of? And what is it that I just want to spend my time doing in general? I think that's just, it's an easy thing to just ask yourself what I value. And, for me personally, when I thought about this question, and this is in towards building out and being a reflection of my own philosophy, right? Right. I think part of the philosophy that I hope to, push and develop out into this, sort of space is that having businesses guarded by values is super important. And so, my values is that I really value creativity. I value free time. I value time with my partner and my family. I value being able to work with people that I consider friends. And I also value, a business that's actually profitable, and that actually cares more about profit than revenue. And I also value being able to create a place that is an expression of me. And so, how this kind of flows into, rules and my own rules to the business, I've kind of, somewhat created, 4 rules for myself. And, rule number one is I want 80% profit margins. Rule number two is I want to be able to, have 100 days off a year, or about 90 days. So that's like, taking summer off. Rule number three is I want to take only 3 days of calls a week, because in my previous life, I was doing calls fucking like 6 days a week, and it was fucking killing me, to be frank. And then the last one is I really want to be able to have clients that, I enjoy having wine with. And so when I think of those rules, it really just allows me to prioritize the things that I value, right? 100 days off a year allows me to spend time with my family. I would even add another rule, and being, another rule that I've also, written down. I only writ four because five can be too many. But, another rule is like, I want to be able to have dinner with my partner every night. And so if I think about just, all these rules in general, these rules are just inherently going to give me the constraints for me to go and actually build a business that is a direct reflection of me. And so, when you start thinking about that, I think when you have rules, it starts to make your business a lot more beautiful. And I think, having a business that's a lot more beautiful just means that the business is a reflection of you. It's a product of you, because at the end of the day, I think that's what we're all selling, right? We're all selling ourselves. We're all selling what's in our heads, and we're all selling it in a very structured way. And I think the other part is, if a business without rules, or a business in absence of rules, is just a Frankenstein. It's a monstrosity. It's a monstrosity of someone else's creation. It's a monstrosity of someone else's values, and I don't think that's what we want. And so, this process of identifying, what matters to you, and being able to then build guardrails around that, is important. And I don't think many people give too much credence or too much, effort towards thinking about it. And so, if we just then think about, okay, if we're in a place where we want to actually then build rules into the business, you can just reverse engineer the process that I went through. And it's not too much, it's not too hard, I don't think. I think all you have to do is sit down and ask yourself, well, what is it you value? What do you want to protect? What do you want to spend your time doing? And even have a look at where you spend your money. Because if you're someone that loves to go, to Formula One races all around the world, and that's your thing, that's something that I would love to do, personally, right? Um, then you should be able to build a business that allows you to do that. I don't see why not. I mean, sometimes you can't have everything, but if you pick what's valuable to you, then you should be able to do so. So I think step one is just, understanding what you value. And then I think step two is then just deciding on what rules then just allow you to guard those things. And so, I've seen many a different rules, and, in my time and working with the clients that I have, and, these things can be just like, it can be a certain type of profit margin. It could be, um, it could be a certain amount of employees that you can have in your business. It can be a certain, do you want to like stop working at a certain amount of time? There's a lot of different rules that you can develop, with your business, like with, yourself and your own business. And, they should be an extension again of just guardrailing what it is that you love. Because I think what ends up happening is, and I've been inside of these businesses, is that it's just a priority of, let's just go and try and hit as much money as possible as quickly as possible, with no regard for like what are the things that we're actually building the businesses to actually do more of, or to provide for, which is more time with family, a more richer life. And you know I think the most awesome thing is that once you start defining these rules, you actually end up building the business properly, because you start building the business in the way you market, the way you sell, and the way you deliver, according to the things that you actually want to spend time and keep time for. And so, I've seen it so many times where, there's a lot, like particularly in this industry now, where there's a massive movement of people don't want to spend their time on sales calls, because they value time with their clients more than they value time with, people that are kind of maybe uncertain of their offer. And so this is where you see this massive onset of like people opting in for offer docs. Another thing is like people don't want to be on content treadmills. They want to be able to, have a business that runs, without them having to be on the treadmill. And so a lot of people will opt to use like ads in their business. Not to say that content is not important, but in my previous work, I was inside a 300K a month, education business, and the founder had a lot of free time to do what he wants, because he wasn't required to always be doing content, because he had engineered the business to such an extent that he could just spend money to acquire ads. And that's a beautiful thing. I think, some people give it a bad rap, like ads and all this, but there's benefits that come with it. And, that person built the business in such a way that he could do the things that he valued, which is he valued free time, he valued being able to do things with other people. And, he had other interests outside of just building a coaching education company. And even to the point of like delivery as well, right? If you start to understand that, hey, like, you know, I want to work 20 hours a week and typically I work 40 hours a week and I want to get out of 20 hours of that, it's like go and reverse engineer your delivery, right? Some people would rather not be working intimately with their clients. For me, I do, like when I work with inside of like my one-to-one partnership offer, I know my business, I know my clients' businesses inside and out. And I think that is my zone of genius. It's what I love and I enjoy it. Um, will it change? And potentially, with changing of like my own philosophy and what I value, will I change my rules? Probably. But for now, I know that like the best way that I can provide for people that matter to me, which is my clients, it's providing one to one. And so my delivery will primarily be like that versus someone who might not want to be so intimately involved in delivery because of time constraints or whatever rules they've set in the business. They can basically then opt out of doing like one to one, and maybe they scale into more like agents, course, training, community. Maybe they hire someone to take it over for them. There's so many different options. I do think though, you have to balance that with like profit margins and all this sort of thing. And that's where this is the cool thing about rules, right? Is that, you know, if you have rules around profit margins, you have rules around how much you work, you are forced to build the business in a certain way. You are forced into a state of creativity and innovation that not many people kind of give credence to. And so, the last kind of point I think in towards building, businesses with, rules and values as guardrails to them, if you want to do it in such a way where it's like a little bit more intentional, I would encourage you to then like start thinking about, well, okay, we know our values, we know our rules. Let's now define what is like our magic number. Like, what is the number per year or per month? I prefer people understand it whether from a pre-tax, post-tax perspective, just so they're not getting caught out with like taxes, because I know that's like, unless you're in Dubai. I mean, good on you if you're in Dubai. But for me, someone in Australia who really loves being in Australia, or anyone who might just live in a place that they call home, having an idea of your tax situation is really good. But to the point, if you know your magic number, you can then start to go, okay, my rules, my values, and this is the number I need to hit. How do I need to develop the business in terms of the way I sell, the way I deliver, and the way that I acquire clients, and the way that I actually like market my business so that I can hit this number? Because at the end of the day, all you're trying to do is reverse engineer delivery, acquisition, pricing, and all these different variables in your business so that you can hit your ultimate magic number goal, which is, what is enough for you to sustain the lifestyle that you want and be able to put that enough away for into your investments, go do the things that you want, go have the car that you want, whatever it may be. The idea is, how do you take that plus your rules and reverse engineer then the core components of the business so that you can have both? Because what happens in most cases, from what I've seen, is that there is no rules. People have the number, and then they will do whatever means necessary to go hit the number in the most efficient way. But what ends up happening is they end up building a business that is basically just purely based on efficiency and the quickest path to the goal, which isn't always the most enjoyable path. Sure, it might get you that quickest, it might you know, make you feel good for a period of time. But I've seen a lot of times where a lot of people just say to me, I hate my business. I don't like sales teams. I have a sales team I don't like. I don't like trying to get sales calls. I just want to hang with my family, play sport, and enjoy a glass of wine on a Friday and not have to worry about a lot of things. And I think that's totally fair. I think that's, personally for me, I've got my rules and I would love to have a glass of wine on a Friday. And I intend to have my glass of wines on Friday. I intend to have a business that does not provide me a lot of stress. I want something that's simple. I want something that's calm. And I intend to have rules that allow me to do that. And so I would also encourage you, if you're listening to this and you've made it this far to the end, think about what you value. Go and decide what your rules are for your business. Go and pick your magic number, which is the amount of money that you need to go satisfy all all your desires and wants and financial needs, etc. Right? For me, it's 880K post tax. I know that will give me probably half a mil, after tax. And that for me at this point in my life and where my goals are is enough for me to go have what I want. And so then it's up to me to reverse engineer everything so that I can hit that whilst protecting the things that matter to me. And so that's really it. If you enjoyed this video, uh, amazing. If you didn't, I don't know why you're still here. But otherwise, I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.